Good morning. Thursday, January 23rd. Starting out looking at Netflix, which is seeing a positive reaction to its earnings announcement yesterday, as evidenced by this 16% gap higher. This over-under setup is subject to change depending on what goes on here the next 29 minutes. But as it stands now, I'm going to go with an over-under 390 setup, where the over is looking for a move towards 400, and the under is looking for just a gap fill, 380 on down, 385, 380 on down. Netflix entered the day neutral. I've got a close above 341.60 today as bullish, a close below 319 as bearish, and a close in between those two prices as neutral to bearish. Would be a hell of a fade if it ends up triggering anything but a bullish close today. Now I've got some other notes that I want to go over on Netflix from the last earnings report as I watched the film from October 22nd, the last reaction day. But I'm going to wait to go over those until closer to the bell, just because I'm sure we're going to have more people coming in here, and I don't want to be repeating myself. So we will circle back to Netflix in a little bit. Looking at Amazon, which is gapping down on some decent volume here, and it had a gap up, and it was actually gapping higher yesterday after hours. So this is interesting that it's reversed itself and now come under this pressure. I had an over-under 405 setup coming into the day, but this gap down, taking it towards that psychological 400 level. So I'm going to go with the over-under 400, where the over is looking for a red to green move, and the under is looking for 395 on down. Amazon enters the day bullish. I've got a close above 402 as bullish, a close below 393 as bearish, and a close in between those two prices as neutral. Yesterday, Amazon gapped $1 higher, and the price filled its gap lower right away, falling below its opening price and its initial 3-minute low to a 936 intraday low before then going sideways ahead of 10 o'clock. So it held that first 6-minute low, but went sideways. However, during that sideways move ahead of 10 o'clock, Amazon respected reference point resistance at its initial 6-minute high, failed to get above that level, and kept coming back down near its low, which set up a slow-paced move to the downside from 10 o'clock to 10:50. So respecting resistance ahead of 10 o'clock set up a move lower during the 10 o'clock hour. It was just at a slow pace. Then you just had another sideways move from 10:50 to 12 o'clock when Amazon then began bouncing back towards its initial 60-minute range until 12:45, before then just going sideways the rest of the day. So there was a decent little fade off of the slight gap higher, but the tradable move for the most part ended at 10:50 before a sideways / choppy price action took over. We'll see if Amazon holds on to these losses. Netflix, meanwhile, good job staying around 390. Looking at Apple, which is gapping slightly lower, just below psychological support or a psychological reference point at 550, making for a nice and simple over-under 550 trade, where the over is looking for 555 on up with a red to green move. So 551.50, that was your break-even price. So that's going to be a key reference point if you do start moving higher. and the under is looking for 545 on down, where your key reference point is yesterday's low of 547.80. Apple enters the day neutral. A close above 558.50 is bullish. A close below 539 is bearish, and a close in between those two prices keeps things neutral. Yesterday, Apple gapped $2 higher, and the price was very whippy within its initial 6-minute range into the 10 o'clock hour, finally breaking cleanly to the upside, though, shortly after 10 o'clock at 10:05, where then Apple held its initial 6-minute high and 3-minute high as reference point support from 10:10 to 10:20, and that set up a continued move higher that took place from about 10:40 to 11:15. After that time, the price was just in a sideways channel from 11:15 to 1 o'clock. But then shortly after the 1 o'clock hour, Apple fell below its previous 60-minute candle's low and downtrended cleanly until just about a 2 o'clock low a day. And then from 2 o'clock on, you just had sideways action overall. So Apple kind of had a little bit of everything. It moved higher yesterday, it moved lower, and it also moved sideways. But none of those moves, up or down, had any serious range extending momentum. You had some spurts and fits of momentum, but overall, it wasn't a super wide range day, so nothing crazy happened. Looking at Google, which is pretty flat, Google's been a slow trade the last couple of days, and this pre-market action kind of lines up with that so far. I had an over-under 1165 setup coming into the day with the slight gap down. I'm going to revert that to an over-under 1160 setup, where the over is looking for a red degree test at 1165 on up, and the under is looking for 1155 on down. Google enters the day bullish. I've got a close above 158.85 as bullish, a close below 1144 as bearish, and a close in between those two prices as neutral. Yesterday, Google gapped $3 higher, but the price started filling its gap right away, falling below its opening price and downtrending slowly to a 945 low of day. After 945, though, Google did absolutely nothing in the way of clean directional movement, never really getting $1 extension above or below its initial 15-minute range. And just overall, it was a really slow day for Google. No real setup ever emerged, aside from maybe the first 15 minutes when there was a short trade off of the slight gap higher, but again, that was a slow-paced move and not a whole lot of volatility associated with it. Looking at Tesla, which is gapping down, but on incredibly low volume. Volume hasn't been this low on Tesla pre-market since before that big move higher last week. I've got an over-under 177.50 setup, just the midway point between 175 and 180. Where 180s are in play on the over, and 175 on down is in play on the under. Tesla enters the day bullish. A close above 174.75 is bullish. A close below 167.95 is bearish, and a close in between those two prices is neutral to bullish. Yesterday, Tesla gapped $1.20 higher, and then the price kind of moved sideways to lower at a very, very slow pace off of its open, moving to new lows near a round number reference point of 175. until about 1040. After 1040, you had sideways action in association to that 175 level, when then at 11 o'clock, Tesla got a nice bounce back higher off of that round number reference point and rallied pretty strongly until an 1140 intraday high, where after 1140 the price was just in a sideways channel the rest of the day. So you had a slow pace move lower the first 70 minutes of the day, which gave way to a pretty solid bounce during the 11 o'clock hour, with then nothing really doing after that. Looking at Priceline, which has a gap down on the price, but no real volume to speak of. I've got an over under 1210 setup, where the over is looking for 1220s and the under is looking for a 1200 back test with 1190s in play. Priceline enters the day bullish. A close above 1204.50 is bullish. A close below 1176 is bearish, and a close in between those two prices is neutral. Yesterday, Priceline gapped $2 higher, and the price made a nice move higher within the first 20 minutes of the day after it held its initial 3-minute low and broke above its 3-minute high at 9:33. However, after 9:50, the price action really slowed down, and there was no continuation higher. Instead, Priceline just went sideways to lower in a slow, choppy fashion throughout the rest of the day, not giving anything real clean in the way of directional movement with any type of range extension. And this was the second day in a row that Priceline was in a channel for the most part after the first 15-20 minutes of the day. So Netflix still hanging out around 390, not holding that level, but, hanging on to a good chunk of this gap. So still looking at that over under 390 setup. All right, we've got a decent amount of people in here, so I'll go over now my Netflix specific notes. So I watched the film from the last earnings report on Netflix, and it's striking how similar this is right now pre-market. Last earnings, Netflix gapped up pretty much exactly to where it is right now, 388s, 389s, in this 380 range, albeit it was from a 355 close, so the percentage gain wasn't as big, but still was a big gap nonetheless. And what happened off of that earnings is Netflix sold off right away, sold off hard as well, came below its opening price. It opened around 388s, and it fell quickly. Within the first minute, it was printing 386s, 385s. That's number one. So the first move was lower. It made no attempt at going above its opening price whatsoever. And that move lower continued the first 5-6 minutes of the day, as Netflix fell from that 388 open to 379s by 9:36. Where then you had a bounce start at 9:36, where Netflix bounced from 379s to 385. A nice bounce, right? However, we had a couple things go on during that bounce. Number one, it couldn't get back above 385, which is a round number reference point. That would be one of those over-under setups we might look for. All right, so that was number one. Number two, 385 was also around Netflix's initial 3-minute low. So we had the price stall out both around a round number reference point on the bounce and around its initial 3-minute low, failed to establish itself back above those reference points, And that ultimately set up a further move lower as Netflix then reversed back to the downside right away and was printing 380s again. And the price broke cleanly below its initial 15-minute low between 9:45 and 10 o'clock and just started to fall. You know, could never really find its footing. And once Netflix came below 380 for a second time, you know, on that new low a day, it was unable to establish itself back above that round number reference point. So just like we couldn't see it establish itself back above 385 once it came below it, last time we didn't see it come back above 380 with any type of conviction once it fell below that level as well. And ultimately, you know, that resulted in further selling down to the 370s, and it moved into the 360s. Once you got into the 360s, the same thing that happened at 385 and 380 happened at 370. Once you fell below 370 on Netflix, you could not establish itself back above that level, that round number. All right, so the way we can use that information to help us trade this thing today is, number one, with the opening price. Remember, Netflix never ever made an attempt above its opening price on its last earnings report. So the first thing I'm watching for today is it able to come above its opening price? If it's able to come above its opening price today, that would represent a major difference from the last earnings report, which we know ended up being a bearish price reaction. So now I'd start looking for a potentially bullish price reaction. So that's first. What goes on with the opening price? Is it able to come above it, or does it come back? Does it come below it right away, similar to the last time? Number two, remember, Netflix couldn't hold any of its lows from the first 10-15 minutes of the day last earnings. So if you see it sell off at first today, but it's able to hold those first 10-minute lows, that could end up signaling a reversal back to the upside. Or if you see it sell off of this gap, and we do break below that 10-minute low, 15-minute low, that could signal continuation to the downside, just like the last earnings report had good continuation lower. Further, and lastly, my main thing, if you sell off and you break below the initial 3-minute low, Netflix needs to stay below the initial 3-minute low to set up further downside. If you come below the initial 3-minute low and Netflix is then able to establish itself back above that price level, that represents a major difference from the last earnings report, and that too signals an upside reversal. I'll copy and paste some of this, what I just said. And again, this is the real beauty of having a video archive. I just got all of this analysis from just going back and watching the live footage from October 22nd. Are there any questions about that analysis relative to Netflix? One of my biases coming into the day today for Netflix was that it was going to sell off a little bit on the gap higher, maybe 5 to 10 points. And then I'm looking for stability with a bounce back higher towards its opening price. That was just kind of one of my gut feelings that I had after seeing what it was doing yesterday after hours. But, I'm not married to that by any means. I've got these notes prepared, and, let's see what shapes up here. So if you stay down here, I'm going to change my over-under from 390 to an over-under 385, giving some allowance for a slight gap fill down towards that 385 round number, and then go from there. But I'm going to wait just a couple more minutes to see, are you staying around here or are you getting back up towards 390? Good question. The market's gapping down. How do I believe that will affect, or how do I think that'll affect Netflix? You had a weird wording. I don't know how it will affect Netflix. I'm not going to try and guess. I'm just going to watch Netflix. I believe Netflix will do its own thing. If I see it moving with the market, then I'll look to be more aware of what's going on with the market. But, the stock has a very specific catalyst in the form of that earnings report. So, I think the market's looking to just trade Netflix based on that earnings report and based on whatever type of price action shows up. I don't think the market's going to have a major effect on Netflix. But again, if the market's selling off and Netflix starts selling off, then, I want to be aware of that. But it's one of those things where, I'm not married to anything. Sometimes we talk ourselves out of trades because of what the market is doing. The market might be selling off. You might see a stock going up. You might say, oh, well, this stock's going up, but the market's going to pull it down. And it just keeps going up, and the market just keeps going down. So I used to be pretty big on knowing exactly what the market was doing, but I don't think it's as important today, and just in general, I don't think it's as important as I used to think it was. So nice job recovering back up towards 390 here on Netflix. I do think you can see 400s today. I am open to that. Just have to see what the open looks like. So still hanging out. Oh, spoke too soon. 387s. All right, so getting a little pressure here. So a slight sell-off just ahead of the bell, a couple bucks. So you do have some pressure off of that 390. So with that move right now, I'm going to change to an over-under 385 setup. Apple right around 550, Google right around 1160. So let's see what shapes up. So 387s open. So let's see if you get 388s. Came below its opening price, so far similar to the last report. Real wide spreads on these option strikes right now. So getting that 385 test. So you are getting this first move to the downside. Spreads have tightened up. Getting 384, so far similar price action to the downside. So 380, next support level. Again, my bias calls for a little sell-off. I'm bidding $2.40 on a 395 call. I like a long setup versus 380-ish. Open bid at $2.40 on a 395 call as this 380 level is getting approached. So far it is similar to the last report, but again, this is in line with what my bias is. My bias called for a sell-off at first, and then a recovery. All right, I filled that bid. So now, I want to see it be stable around 380. I want to see this pressure kind of give way to some stability around 380. I am in an open position on the 395 call. I'm in a Netflix 395 call. I need stability back above 380. So testing 381. But still back below 380 here. Need those bids above 380, and I need it to hold. Thought we might have had the start of a nice little bounce, but came back below 380, back above it. You can see the whippy action. I'm on the ask at 315 for part of my position. Struggling with 381. Need that push. Get some 382s, and I should fill that sell. Need it back above 380 here. I'm on my toes, ready to stop out if it can't recover. Still hanging out close enough to 380 to keep me in for now. And, I got a decent entry point, so that always makes things easier as well. I didn't buy before I wanted to. So back above 380 now, so hopefully that was the last of the shakeout. And now we can start a solid bounce back up towards 385. Need a 382 breakout. If we can get a 382 breakout, I'm looking for 385s. I'm liking this, guys, to be honest with you. Try not to get overly excited. Still need to see that 382 breakout, but so far it does seem like a difference from the last report. Need that push. Need that push. Need a 382 breakout. And if we get that, this trade will really work. If we don't, it won't. Simple as that. There we go, 382 test. So you cross 382 here. I sold half of my position at $3.10. We're rocking and rolling now. We got that 382 breakout. So got that stability. Major difference from last report. Breaking above that 6-minute high. That's something you didn't do last time. So now let's see if we can get stability. 382s, and we can go to 390. Be open-minded. Early on in the day, we had a good shake. And ideally now, we're trending higher. Need 382 stability. Again, I did sell half of my position. Testing 385. Nice rip there through 385. Little churn back off of it. Don't want to see it come too far off of 385. So good job getting back above 385 right there, or just back to it. Again, just need to be staying around 385 in order to keep looking for 390s. So came back off of it again, just need to stay in this range. Notice the bids keep being able to hold that 384 level. I like that. I want to continue to see that. Beautiful. Beautiful price action right there on the level 2. Now we just need to start stabilizing above 385, and we're going to see 390s. Here we go, guys. 387s. Now I want to be staying above 385 at this point, since we got a decent spike above it. I'm on the ask at 450 for my remaining position as that 390 target is approaching. I'm all out at $4.50 from that $2.40 entry as it's coming up to my 390 target. That's how we do it. So now let's see what goes on at 390. Fucking nailed the bottom on that thing. How many people you think got bottom like we did off that trade? That just goes to show you, when you're prepared, when you know what to look for, when you know how to spot differences, that results in good trades. All right, so now you want to be staying away from 385. We want to leave 385 out of the question, all right? So, I'm going to say 386 to 387 support. Keeps higher highs above 390 intact. So 386, 387 support keeps higher highs above 390 intact, or an ability to just stay up around here for a couple minutes and just not come off of these highs as it's testing 390 here. My one regret is going to be this 390 cross. Could have sold into that, but that's all right. Still made a solid trade, but always looking to get better. So good solid showing, not having a hard move, not even coming back into those 387s. This is really strong price action on Netflix. I do think 400 is in play. You're getting a 390 cross here. Let's see what this looks like. All right, so it seems a little bit exhausted in the immediate term because you came up to 390 and then went right back down to 389. So let's see. I wish they had some 397.50 calls, but they don't. I am watching some 400 strike calls. One thing to keep an eye out for, though, our initial 3-minute high, 388. Netflix, let's see if it can establish itself above 388. Can it avoid even coming back below 388 and printing 387s and whatnot? If it can, that'd be very bullish. So if we can go to 400s today, I want to see Netflix break and hold 390 by about 10:15, 10:30. Sometime in the first part of the 10 o'clock hour. That's my bias in order to be able to look for 400s. So I'm just making a note. 400s in play on ability to break and hold, B and H, break and hold, B and H, 390. All right, so you're getting it right here. So here's your break. Now let's see, do we get a hold? Again, I had said by 10:15. This is certainly, all right, so that's sick right here. All right, so 400s are in play. Guess that's what it's telling me. And this is why I'm hard on myself, because I locked in 85% gains, but you can see now those are up over 100%, and there's real potential behind these moves. So now the setup is just a simple over-under 390 setup, where if you can hold above 390 on any dips, 400s will remain in play. This is the part where my 85% gain starts to look small. But I don't want to let that force me into making a trade that I'm not fully comfortable in and don't have good mechanics to. I still want to see some price action here. This is obviously a nice move. If you chase that 390 breakout, it's working. I didn't, so I'm just watching. But this is very, very strong. Not giving any real pullback off of this. So 395 test, so really straight to 395 off of 390. Again, I'm not going to chase just because I'm not comfortable with that. But the 390 chase trade did work. Now I just kind of need to observe price action and wait for a good setup. Hey, it might be that this thing just goes to 400 and never gives me a real clean setup that I'm comfortable with, and I just have to be satisfied with the job that I did, knowing that I tried to do my best. Ideally, that doesn't happen. Ideally, we get a little bit of a consolidation or a churn here above 390, where we can set up further upside. But for those of you that are new, it just goes to show you the power behind options. If you get in at a good entry, you really don't have to do a lot of work. That's why I'm always so hard on myself, because I know what's possible if you execute optimally. So I'm not watching it too closely, but Amazon here has made a nice move higher off of its gap down. So watch to see if you can hold 405. What's going on elsewhere? Apple super slow, Google super slow, Priceline super slow, Tesla looks like it had a good move down but is now recovered. So looks like Netflix, definitely validated and focusing in on that. All right, so getting a little pullback here. The whole thing with this pullback is as long as the price action looks good enough to support a move to 400, I'm interested in the trade. If I start believing that it can't get to 400, then I'm really not interested in a further trade, and I'm just going to be satisfied with what I was able to do on it.